Before anything else, let me ask you something real quick because it truly makes a difference. Subscribe to the channel right now, hit like, and turn on notifications. This isn't just routine. It ensures you're the first to get the real information. No noise, no recycled rumors, especially at a moment when every detail about the Warriors can change everything from 1 hour to the next. Now, take a deep breath and come with me. Warriors Nation, breathe with me. If you woke up today thinking you were finally going to see that trade happen, I know exactly the bitter taste that hit when the news showed up out of nowhere. Because with this team, it always feels like the same script. The hope starts to grow. The rumor heats up. Insiders start lining up. The fit looks obvious. And then, all of a sudden, everything collapses. Not with a clear explanation, not with an official announcement, but with silence, conflicting versions, and that feeling that something went off the rails behind the scenes. And what put everyone even more on alert is this detail that surfaced almost like a whisper, but carries real weight. There are signs the NBA itself may have entered the orbit of this story. Not in the sense of directly interfering in decisions, but as a factor that changes the pace, the tone, and even the viability of certain negotiations. And relax, because this doesn't mean conspiracy or some crazy theory. It means league politics, rules, precedent, and a scenario that's far more complex than it looks on Twitter. The point here is simple. It wasn't just one trade that cooled off. It was a chain of small roadblocks that, added together, created this unexpected twist. And when you start connecting the dots, you realize the initial read was incomplete. What looked like mere indecision might actually be a clash of interests that goes far beyond two franchises swapping assets. If you've followed the Warriors long enough, you know how to tell when a rumor is just smoke and when it has real weight. This one did. It felt different, because it wasn't only about improving the rotation. It was about acknowledging internally that the moment demands something more aggressive. When you still have Stephen Curry playing at this level, there is no such thing as a transition season. Every year is a rare opportunity. Wasting that isn't just a basketball mistake, it's almost historical negligence. But then the engine locks up. And when it locks up, the frustration isn't only about the name that fell off the radar. It's the feeling of paralysis, of standing at a clear crossroads and still hesitating. On one side, the urgency to win now, to maximize what's left of a peak that doesn't repeat. On the other, the constant fear of compromising the future, of making the wrong move, of being remembered as the one who pressed the wrong button. The problem is that this balance between present and future, in practice, rarely exists. It's a comforting idea, but an illusion. The league is full of teams that tried to keep one foot in each direction and ended up falling in the middle. They weren't bad enough to rebuild, and they weren't good enough to contend. They got stuck in limbo, exactly where no fan wants to be. When you look coldly at the current roster, without romanticizing the past, without living off memory, the conclusion is uncomfortable. Something is missing. There isn't enough offensive weight when the game tightens. There isn't someone who can create when the system stops flowing. There isn't an escape valve when Curry gets doubled, when the defense takes the ball out of his hands and forces someone else to decide. That void shows up in the same moments every time. Late game, playoffs, physical series, half-court basketball. That's why the conversation around a proven veteran hit the fan base so hard. Not because he's perfect, not because he solves everything alone, but because he represents something the Warriors have lost in recent years: predictability under pressure. Someone who doesn't disappear when the moment gets heavy. Someone who has lived through nights where every possession is worth an entire season. In parallel, there's the other side of the debate. The younger, more athletic name who fits the modern logic of the league better. Shoots, defends multiple positions, runs the floor, still has years left on his deal. On paper, it's beautiful. On a spreadsheet, it looks flawless. But real basketball rarely respects paper alone. When you face teams like Denver, or even hungry young Western projects, experience weighs more than any optimistic projection. This is where the fans' real pain comes in, because the more time passes, the clearer it becomes that it may be impossible to please everyone. Any choice will hurt. Trading the future for the present hurts. Protecting the future and accepting limitations right now also hurts. The difference is that one of those pains comes with an attempt, the other comes with resignation. And at the center of this equation is Jonathan Kuminga. The talent is undeniable. The physical tools, the explosion, the flashes that make anyone imagine a massive leap. But there's also the inconsistency, the unfinished process, the difficulty of fully fitting into a team that needs to win right now. When a young player is constantly mentioned as trade currency, the league notices, the value shifts, the negotiating margin shrinks. No one offers their best package when they know the other side has to move. That puts the Warriors in a delicate position. Negotiating out of need almost never produces ideal deals, but not negotiating can be even worse. Betting that everything will get solved internally sounds more and more risky for a team that still has one of the greatest players in history carrying the weight of competitiveness night after night. What weighs most is the feeling that there may not be a clean solution, that there may not be that perfect trade, balanced, painless, emotionally cost-free. Maybe every decision now comes with sacrifice, future picks, depth, flexibility. The problem is time doesn't stop. The deadline is approaching. Every game without an adjustment increases the pressure. And nobody forgets the recent past. Decisions that seemed right and later demanded a high price. Contracts that didn't work. Bets that didn't pay off. That explains part of the current fear. No one wants to be remembered as the one who slammed the window shut. But there's an even bigger risk, less talked about. The risk of doing nothing and watching this era slip through your fingers. In the end, it all comes down to a hard question that few want to face directly. Are the Warriors truly just one piece away from contending? Or is that narrative simply an attempt to stretch something that already missed its ideal timing? The answer changes everything. It changes the kind of trade, the level of aggression, even how the future gets built. The West doesn't forgive. Hungry young teams, deep rosters, rising stars. Competing in that environment demands clarity. It demands conviction. And that's exactly what seems to be missing right now. Not talent, not resources, but a firm vision of which path to take. The fan base feels it. Every rumor, every silence, every report becomes fuel for anxiety. Because everyone knows it's not just a trade. It's about legacy. It's about how this era will be remembered. As a team that had the courage to go all the way, or as a dynasty that hesitated when it couldn't afford to hesitate. And meanwhile, the clock keeps running. Stephen Curry keeps delivering absurd nights, as if he's wordlessly asking for an answer. The talent is still there. What's missing is a decision. And this story is far from over. If we continue this conversation exactly where we left off, the first point that needs to be clear is that none of what's happening right now is accidental. When a franchise the size of the Warriors enters an extended silent zone near the deadline, it almost always means an internal conflict of interpretation, not a lack of information. Options exist. Names are on the table. Scenarios have been simulated. What's stuck is the final decision, the one that doesn't come with an undo button, because from the outside, the temptation is to think it's just about courage. But on the inside, every choice carries chain reaction consequences. It's not only who comes in, it's who goes out. It's the impact on the locker room. It's the message sent to the roster. It's what this says, out loud, about what stage of its competitive life this franchise believes it's in. And here's a detail few people discuss with real depth. Stephen Curry has never been a player who creates public noise. He doesn't pressure through the media. He doesn't throw hints. He doesn't build an external narrative. But anyone who follows closely knows how to read signals. The way he plays, the energy, the level of commitment, even in games that on paper seem ordinary, everything communicates something. It's not desperation. It's silent urgency. It's someone who knows exactly what each season costs as it passes. At the same time, the front office looks at the roster and sees weaknesses that aren't simple to fix with one single move. There's a lack of secondary creation, a lack of defensive consistency in certain matchups, a lack of reliable depth for long series. Adding one name solves one problem, but can open another. That's the real dilemma. There is no neutral upgrade. Every new piece shifts something else. When the first reports came out that certain talks simply weren't advancing, a lot of people read it as a lack of aggression. But there's another possible interpretation. In some cases, the asking price wasn't just high, it was disproportionate to the real impact. Future picks, developing young players, salary flexibility, all of that for a return that might not clearly place the team above the top Western rivals. And then the uncomfortable question appears. Is it worth sacrificing that much just to be slightly better? Because there's a huge difference between improving and becoming truly dangerous in the playoffs. The current West doesn't reward the middle ground. Either you enter a series believing you can win 4 games against anyone, or you enter hoping something unlikely happens. This is the point where Jonathan Kuminga returns to the center of the board. He represents, at the same time, hope and currency, potential and uncertainty. The kind of player who could make a leap and become fundamental, or never fully reach what people project. Keeping Kuminga is a bet on tomorrow. Trading him is a bet that today is still worth that price. The problem is that decision doesn't happen in a vacuum. When rumors pile up, when the name circulates too much, the market value shifts. Other teams start negotiating colder, more calculated, with less urgency. No one pays full price for something that looks available anyway. That weakens the Warriors' leverage, even when the original intent wasn't to negotiate out of desperation. There's also the internal impact of all of this. Players feel it. The locker room notices uncertainty. When the roster doesn't know if tomorrow it'll wake up to a completely different face, that affects confidence, chemistry, performance, and still sometimes it's a price you have to pay to try for something bigger. The risk of doing nothing also collects its debt. Every tight loss, every game where Curry does everything and it still isn't enough, feeds the narrative of waste. And that narrative sticks. It sticks to the fan base. It sticks to the media. It sticks to history. Nobody wants to look back and say that era ended not because of a lack of talent, but because of too much caution. On the other hand, nobody wants to be remembered as the one who mortgaged the future with no return. That impossible balance is what paralyzes. It's not incompetence. It's fear of failing big. But in elite sports, failing small over and over is also a form of failure. The most honest thing to say is that there may be no comfortable choice. Any path now requires owning a message. If the decision is aggressive, the message is clear. We're going all in with what's left of this era. If the decision is conservative, the message is also clear. We're starting, quietly, to turn the page. What you can't do is try to carry both messages at the same time. That confuses everyone. It confuses the roster, it confuses the fan base, and most importantly, it confuses decision-making itself. Great franchises define themselves when they pick a path and accept the consequences. And while all of this is happening, the league doesn't wait. Other teams move, fits happen, opportunities disappear. Staying still is also a decision, even if it doesn't feel like it. And many times, it's the most comfortable in the short term and the most painful in the long term. The situation can still change fast. One conversation unlocking, one offer being adjusted, one internal read aligning, or none of that happening. And maybe that uncertainty is what weighs the most right now, because it keeps everyone suspended, no answer, no closure, no clear direction. What can be said for sure is that this moment will be remembered regardless of the outcome, because it exposes something bigger than any specific trade. It exposes the crossroads of an entire era. Courage versus caution, present versus future, risk versus regret. And that's exactly why you need to keep following everything closely. If this content helped you understand what's really behind the silence and the decisions, hit like right now and subscribe to the channel. That strengthens this space and ensures you get the next updates as soon as this story moves. Turn on notifications too, because when something finally breaks loose, it'll happen fast, and you'll want to know immediately.